For nearly 2 centuries, the Christian cross and the Islamic crescent clashed across the blood-soaked lands of the Holy East. The Crusades were not just wars, they were divine missions, political gambles, and brutal struggles for survival. Kings, knights, and peasants all claimed they fought for God, yet the earth was drenched with human greed and vengeance. But behind the chaos and holy banners, a deeper truth lies forgotten. Were the Crusades ever truly about faith, or were they the greatest political manipulation in medieval history? In 1095, Pope Urban II stood before a crowd in Clermont, France, his voice trembling with passion and authority. He painted Jerusalem as a land defiled by heathens and cried that God himself demanded liberation. The people listened, their hearts set ablaze by his words. Peasants saw salvation. Knights saw glory and forgiveness for their sins. What began as a sermon became a wildfire, a crusade that would send thousands marching east, believing they carried the will of heaven itself. But faith would soon collide with reality in ways no one could imagine. The papal decree spread through Europe like divine thunder, uniting fractured kingdoms under one banner. Lords who once fought each other now swore to fight for Christendom, yet many whispered that the Pope's motives were not purely holy. The Byzantine Empire's plea for aid had opened a political door, one that Rome could exploit to reclaim influence over the East. Behind the sermons of mercy, there was ambition, power, and a chance to unite Europe under one spiritual empire. As thousands took the cross, families wept and priests blessed their swords. Villages emptied, cities prepared supplies, and songs of holy war echoed through the air. For many, it was redemption. For others, it was a chance to escape poverty or seek fortune in the East. The Crusades began not with a single battle, but with the promise of eternal life, a promise that would soon be paid for in blood. The first waves of crusaders were not knights or noblemen, but peasants armed with pitchforks and faith. They believed God himself would protect them, but the journey was merciless. Hunger, disease, and ambushes tore their ranks apart before they ever saw the Holy Land. They pillaged villages, both Christian and Muslim, convinced every hardship was a divine test. Faith was their armor, but ignorance was their doom. The People's Crusade became a disaster long before it reached Jerusalem's gates. Yet behind them marched trained armies, armored, disciplined, and fueled by vengeance. Men like Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse led their banners through Anatolia, carving a path of terror and devotion alike. For them, this was no pilgrimage. It was conquest wrapped in holiness. They believed every slain enemy was a step closer to paradise. Yet, as they crossed Byzantine lands, mistrust grew. The Eastern Christians they came to help saw them as reckless invaders. By the time the Crusaders reached Antioch, their faith was tested beyond limits. Starvation and siege gripped their souls, but relics like the Holy Lance rekindled their divine fire. When the city fell, massacres followed, not just of soldiers, but of civilians. What began as a holy cause was now soaked in fanatic bloodlust. The cross had become both a banner of faith and a weapon of destruction. When the Crusaders finally reached Jerusalem in 1099, their eyes filled with tears and their swords with vengeance. After weeks of siege, they stormed the city's walls, unleashing one of history's most brutal massacres. For the Crusaders, Jerusalem was not just land, it was heaven made real. They established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, ruled by Godfrey, who refused the title king out of humility. calling himself Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. But the peace was short-lived. The new Christian rulers faced endless rebellions, surrounded by hostile Muslim states that saw the Crusaders as foreign occupiers. The moral question began to haunt the survivors. Could such unimaginable violence truly be holy? Some priests began to whisper doubts, while others silenced them with scripture. For every man who found salvation, 1,000 souls lay buried beneath the stones of Jerusalem. Silent witnesses to humanity's cruel misunderstanding of faith. The Muslim world had been divided when the Crusaders arrived, but Jerusalem's fall united them in fury. From Damascus to Cairo, imams called for jihad, not as vengeance but as survival. Great leaders like Ahmad ad-Din Zinji and later his son Nur ad-Din rose to reclaim the lost lands. Under their banners, Islam found unity once more. The tide began to turn, and the invaders soon discovered that conquest was easier than keeping power. Zinji's capture of Edessa in 1144 shocked Europe. The first Crusader kingdom had fallen, and with it, the illusion of divine invincibility. Panic spread across Christendom, and a new crusade was called. Kings like Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany took the cross, but unlike the first, their campaign lacked unity and purpose. Political rivalry overshadowed faith, and the Second Crusade crumbled in humiliation. Meanwhile, Nur ad-Din's dream of a united Islamic world began to take shape. His vision would be fulfilled by a man destined to change the world, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to the West as Saladin. The war for the Holy Land was far from over. It was about to enter its most legendary chapter. Saladin was not born a conqueror, but became one through faith, discipline, and mercy. Unlike the Crusader lords who sought glory, Saladin sought unity. He gathered Syria and Egypt under his command, forging an empire strong enough to challenge the might of Europe. His armies marched not for greed, but to restore dignity to the Muslim world. Even his enemies would come to respect his honor. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin struck the decisive blow. The Crusader army, led by King Guy of Jerusalem, was crushed under the desert sun. The true cross, their holiest relic, was captured. It was the end of Christian dominance in the Holy Land. The victory was not merely military, it was moral. Saladin's restraint after Jerusalem's recapture shocked the world. Unlike the Crusaders, he spared its people. Europe mourned, yet even in defeat, tales of Saladin's chivalry spread through the continent. He became a paradox, a Muslim ruler admired by Christian poets. His name echoed through the halls of kings and cathedrals alike. The question of righteousness no longer had simple answers. The loss of Jerusalem ignited the Third Crusade, the greatest of all. Kings answered the call: Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. It was no longer a mob of zealots, but an army of kings. Yet destiny would pit two legends against each other, Richard and Saladin. Their battles raged from Acre to Arsuf, marked not just by blood, but by mutual respect. Richard's brilliance on the battlefield matched Saladin's patience and strategy. Each victory was short-lived, each truce temporary. They fought like rivals, but treated each other like equals. When Richard fell ill, Saladin sent him fruit and medicine, a gesture that transcended faith. Though Richard never reclaimed Jerusalem, his courage became legend. The war ended with a fragile peace, allowing Christian pilgrims safe passage to the city. The Crusades had found a moment of honor amidst centuries of chaos, a glimpse of what humanity could be when guided by respect rather than hate. Not all who took the cross were warriors. In 1212, thousands of children across Europe claimed they had been called by God to peacefully reclaim Jerusalem. Led by shepherd boys and blind faith, they marched toward the sea, believing it would part before them. But the seas did not part, and the children never reached the Holy Land. Many died from hunger, while others were sold into slavery. The tragedy shocked Christendom, revealing the desperation that had gripped its people. The Church disowned the movement, yet it exposed the deep hunger for divine purpose in a broken age. Even as kings and knights grew weary, the people still dreamed of salvation. The Crusades had become less about land and more about belief itself, belief powerful enough to destroy the innocent. The Children's Crusade stands as one of history's darkest parables, that even purity can be twisted by misguided zeal. It asked again the question few dared to answer: could God truly desire such suffering in His name? The Fourth Crusade was born from corruption, not faith. In 1202, when Crusaders gathered to reclaim Jerusalem once more, Venice saw opportunity. The Doge Enrico Dandolo, an old and cunning merchant, offered ships for a price. When the Crusaders couldn't pay, he turned their mission toward profit. They sacked Christian cities, looting Zara, and in 1204, storming Constantinople itself, the heart of Eastern Christianity. The city burned as relics were stolen, churches desecrated, and emperors dethroned. The Holy Crusade had turned against its own faith. In the ashes of Constantinople, the hypocrisy of the Crusades was laid bare. Latin knights crowned themselves rulers of the Byzantine capital, dividing its wealth like thieves, not saints. The Pope condemned the attack but later accepted its spoils, unwilling to lose power. Europe had devoured one of its oldest Christian civilizations in the name of God. The Orthodox Church would never forget the betrayal, and the wound between East and West would last 1,000 years. For many, the sack of Constantinople was the moment the Crusades lost their soul. No longer were they wars of faith, they were instruments of greed and manipulation. The soldiers returned home rich in gold, but damned in spirit. The Holy Cross had been sold for silver, and Christendom's unity was forever shattered. The Crusader states, Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli, and Edessa, stood as fragile outposts of European ambition in a Muslim sea. They built castles like Crac des Chevaliers and fortified cities that gleamed under the desert sun. For nearly a century, they survived through uneasy alliances and bloodshed. Yet beneath their glittering armor lay decay. The knights grew complacent, their leaders divided, and their faith corrupted by politics. Trade and wealth replaced devotion. Venetian merchants grew rich selling arms to both sides, while the Templars and Hospitallers amassed power greater than kings. The dream of holy unity crumbled into petty rivalries. Muslim leaders watched with patience, waiting for the moment to strike. And when they did, the Crusader states fell one by one, like stones collapsing under the weight of time. By the end of the 13th century, Acre, the last stronghold, fell to the Mamluks. The survivors fled to Cyprus, carrying relics and broken ideals. The Crusader era in the Holy Land was over. The cross had been pushed into the sea, and the Crescent stood victorious. Yet the legend of the Crusades would live on, twisted, glorified, and misunderstood for centuries to come. The Knights Templar were the embodiment of the crusading spirit. Warrior monks sworn to protect pilgrims and defend Christendom. They became rich, powerful, and feared. Their castles stretched from Jerusalem to Paris, and their influence rivaled even kings. But power breeds enemies, and after the Crusades ended, Europe turned against them. In 1307, King Philip IV of France accused them of heresy, sorcery, and treason, false charges to seize their immense wealth. Hundreds of Templars were arrested, tortured, and executed. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, burned at the stake, cursing the king and pope with his dying breath. Whether the Templars were guilty or victims of political greed remains one of history's great mysteries. What is certain is that the very men who once defended the Church became martyrs of its corruption. The fall of the Templars marked the true end of the crusading age. The ideals that once inspired knights to die for Jerusalem now rotted in the vaults of power. Faith had become a currency, and the holy warriors became ghosts haunting the conscience of Europe. While Europe's crusader dreams faded, the Islamic world entered a golden age of knowledge and strength. Cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad flourished as centers of science, art, and philosophy. The same lands once ravaged by holy war now became beacons of wisdom. Scholars preserved ancient Greek texts, advanced medicine, and shaped astronomy, while Europe lay in the shadows of feudalism. The Crusades had unleashed destruction, but they also forged cultural bridges. Returning crusaders brought home spices, architecture, and ideas that slowly ignited Europe's own awakening. Ironically, the wars meant to divide faiths became catalyst for a shared evolution. The East had triumphed not only in war but in enlightenment. As Europe rebuilt itself, it absorbed the very culture it once sought to destroy. Arabic numerals, medical texts, and new philosophies reshaped its future. In the ruins of holy war, civilization found rebirth, a quiet testament that knowledge, not conquest, was the true legacy of faith. Amid the grand battles and noble titles, millions of common people suffered and vanished from memory. Farmers, artisans, women, and children, their stories lost between the lines of history. They bore the cost of every crusade, their fields burned, their cities pillaged, their faith questioned. To them, the Crusades were not holy, they were hell. In the villages of the Levant, Muslims, Christians, and Jews once lived side by side. The wars turned neighbors into enemies, and peace into legend. Chroniclers spoke of miracles, but the real miracle was survival. Amid war, some refused to hate, offering food to the wounded, shelter to strangers, and prayer for all souls. These were the forgotten saints of the Crusades, the ones who found holiness not in war but in mercy. Their memory lingers in the dust of forgotten graves and the stones of ancient churches and mosques. They remind us that history is not written only by kings or conquerors, but by the silent, enduring strength of humanity itself. Even after Jerusalem was lost, the crusading spirit spread across Europe. Popes declared holy wars in Spain against Muslims, in the Baltic against pagans, and even in France against heretics. The term crusade became a tool, a banner to justify conquest wherever power desired it. The holy war had become global, its meaning diluted and corrupted beyond recognition. In the Baltic, Christian knights slaughtered the native Prussians and Lithuanians in the name of faith. In Spain, the Reconquista reclaimed lands from Muslim rulers, but often at the cost of coexistence. Even crusades against Christian heretics like the Cathars revealed the Church's thirst for absolute control. The sword of God had become the weapon of tyranny. By the 14th century, the word crusade no longer meant salvation, it meant domination. The idea that had once united believers now fueled endless conflict. The world had learned to wage holy war, but forgotten how to live in peace. Centuries passed, but the memory of the Crusades refused to die. In Europe, they were romanticized, painted as noble adventures of chivalry and faith. In the Islamic world, they were remembered as invasions, wounds that shaped generations of distrust. Even in modern times, their legacy echoes in politics, religion, and war. The medieval cry of Deus vult, God wills it, still haunts the language of power. Historians now see the Crusades not as a clash of civilizations, but as a tragic meeting of two faiths blinded by pride. Both sides believed they fought for God, yet both committed atrocities that defied the divine. The question of justification still burns centuries later. Were they defense or aggression, faith or folly? Perhaps they were all and none. In truth, the Crusades reveal not the holiness of men, but their frailty. They are mirrors of our own age, where righteousness is still wielded like a sword, and faith too often becomes a banner for violence. In the end, the Crusades left behind no winners, only lessons. The Holy Lands changed hands, but the human heart remained divided. Yet amid centuries of hate, there were moments of light, truces honored, lives spared, and respect shared between enemies. These moments remind us that even in darkness, humanity never completely forgot compassion. The Crusades forced both East and West to confront the limits of their faith. They showed that God's name cannot justify greed, nor can violence bring salvation. They revealed that truth cannot be conquered by the sword, only understood through mercy. Those who sought to defend their beliefs discovered that faith cannot survive when it kills the innocent. Perhaps the true crusade was never for Jerusalem's stones, but for the soul of mankind. A war between pride and humility, between vengeance and understanding. And that war continues not on battlefields, but within every heart that dares to ask, what does it truly mean to fight for God? The Crusades were not just wars, they were reflections of human nature. They showed how faith can inspire the purest courage and the darkest cruelty. Kingdoms rose and fell, but the questions they left behind still burn across centuries. Were they justified? Perhaps that depends on the eyes of those who still believe that righteousness can be won through blood. History reminds us that every holy war leaves behind the same truth, that peace cannot be taken, it must be chosen. The Crusades are over, but their echoes still shape the world we live in today. Their story is not one of saints and sinners, but of humanity, ever torn between the love of God and the lust for power. And so, as the dust of ages settles over the Holy Lands, one truth remains unshaken. The greatest crusade is not of the sword, but of the heart.